I climb up high and shout. Wanna hear me? Listen, your own heart. The best part of growing up in a close-knit neighborhood was to be able to play outside freely during long summer days. Barely being able to wait till sunrise to run back to the streets, and never knowing what being tired meant till sunset. At the end of the day, throwing my tired self to the bed, excited for the next day morning, falling into the most beautiful dreams. One of those bright summer days, my friends and I decided to play soldiers. We were all set to start. Our only problem, though, was to choose a general for our troop. A few of us were ready for this role, so we started to challenge one another, trying to see who would prevail. Can you run this fast? Can you jump this far? Can you lift that up? Can you do this? Can you do that? I was at the top of my game. All of a sudden, one of the older boys pushed me on the shoulder and said, "You cannot be a general. You are a girl." First, I couldn't understand what he meant. I couldn't wrap my head around what he was trying to say. You cannot be a general. You are a girl. I had never heard such a thing before. How on the earth did he link being a girl and not being able to become a general? Somewhat puzzled and upset, I replied, "What a stupid thing that is to say. Tell me one thing that I cannot do better than what you would." He responded, "Can you climb up that utility pole?" "Of course I can. Can you?" I said, and continued, "Go ahead, climb as far as you can. Then watch me." When the boy attempted to climb the utility pole and failed after a few tries, it was my turn. Somewhat hesitant and a little afraid, I put my brave hat on and I started climbing up. My heart was beating so fast that I was barely able to catch my breath. I was not about to give up though. I kept going further and further. Before I knew it, I was almost at the top of the pole. I had accomplished what I had set out to do. My heart was filled with joy. Still trying to catch my breath, I looked down, hoping to see the disbelief on my friends' faces. Instead, all I could see was how high up I was from the ground. Everybody appeared so small that I couldn't distinguish one from another, let alone to see their faces. All of a sudden, a cold wind wrapped my body. A gallop of an imaginary night echoed in my ears. My feet began trembling. My eyes filled with tears. I could barely hear the kids who had been begging me to come down, but I wouldn't lose the face. I had come this far. I wasn't sure how to get down anyway. Instead, I started to shout from the top of my lungs, "I am fearless. I am the fearless." As I screamed louder and louder, I forgot all my fears. My body got warmer, my feet became steady. I still wasn't sure how to manage climbing down, but it didn't matter. It was my moment of triumph. As more people gathered under the pole, I kept screaming, "I am the fearless. I am the fearless. I am the fearless," till someone shouted at me, "Come down now, otherwise we are calling your uncle." Yes, let's call her uncle. My uncle. He was my mother's younger brother, and then barely in his early 20s, had a loud voice and even louder laughter. With his tall stature, broad shoulders, and heavy shadow, he seemed like a giant to me. His visits to our home always felt like loud thunder, breaking a mild, gentle spring day, and filled my little heart with the little anxiety of an unpredictable storm. It wasn't until decades later, when he was struggling with a terminal illness, I was able to see how fragile his soul was. When I heard him singing an old song with a trembling, weak voice, I finally was able to meet this delicate man in a giant costume. After all, he had been the only person I was reluctant to pull my tricks on during my childhood and youth. Let's call her uncle. As soon as I heard that, I climbed down quicker than I could ever imagine. Well, not before the entire neighborhood gathered under the pole, and my mother nearly had a heart attack, though. Till today, I don't remember how I came down the pole and what happened afterwards. But indeed, the sound of my uncle had pulled me back to the reality. After that day, I was the indisputable leader of the neighborhood kids. During my senior year at medical school, I saw two brothers from my old neighborhood in the hospital one day. I wasn't sure if they would ever recognize me after all these years. After they formally greeted me, one of them slightly leaned towards me and whispered, "How is it going, General?" The silhouette of a little girl appeared before my eyes. Her barely 5-year-old little heart would have never guessed how that moment at the top of the utility pole was the beginning of a tradition. I felt the warmth of that precious moment wrapping my soul. I heard a centuries-old song that was celebrating an act of naive courage against all the odds. The heat of that watershed moment circulated in my heart for a second. Then I smiled back at him with the proud realization that the day I learned that name was just the first of many more watch me moments yet to define who I become. To this day, I often feel petrified as I am battling the rough tides of emotions. But the bright eyes of that little girl breathe the same naive courage in my soul. I keep flying, just like a pigeon with a trembling heart.